nudge. A shift, a slight shift, bit by bit. We shifted, we nudged, we moved just a little bit from servitude to slavery. But how? Well, here's Massachusetts, the first colony to legalize and recognize slavery. Other states soon followed. Why? Because it was profitable, like Virginia. Now, do you know who owned the first state-sponsored slave in America? Who owned? Who was this guy that puts a slave? You know who it was? His name was Anthony Johnson, except he wasn't a white man. He, believe it or not, was a black man. You ever heard that? How did a black man own a black man? Well, let's start with him. Before he was an owner, what was he? He was an indentured servant. He was a black indentured servant, not a slave. He worked in Virginia, 1621. It's recorded in the census. His name was Antonio. It just recorded his first name and his race. Well, he wasn't considered a slave. He was an indentured servant. He worked in Virginia on a tobacco farm, and his master allowed him to use his own plot of land, so he perfected his skills on that plot of land for 15 years on that plantation. And during that time, he married. He had 4 children. After all of those years, Antonio finally negotiated and bought his own freedom. So he gave money to this man, and he bought his own freedom. And that's when he decided that he was going to become an owner. He changed his name to Anthony Johnson. And in 1640, Anthony and his wife bought a plot of land and hired, not slaves, because there weren't slaves yet, he hired indentured servants. Got it? Now, that same year, in another place, there was another guy. Anthony was doing all these things. There was a court case involving 3 indentured servants who had escaped. There were 3. And there's 2 white guys and a black guy. Got it? This is different than Anthony, who was over here. Now, these guys ran away. They escaped. They were caught. Well, 2 of them had their servitude extended by 4 years, and the third one had it extended for life. Can you guess which one got life? Which means you no longer can buy your freedom, so you in effect become a slave. It was this one. Are you asking the same question I asked? Why did these guys only get 4 years and this guy get life? Oldest story of time. This was the beginning of slavery. He was black. This is the beginning of the real nightmare that took a long time to get out. Now, back here, these guys are over here. Here's Anthony again. He's got his indentured servant. Well, Anthony's slave was John Castor. John Castor, who was also black, complained to a court that Anthony had unfairly extended his terms of servitude. The court emancipated Castor and said, "You're a free man, you can go." But Anthony went back and he tried to convince a court that Castor belonged to him and should be his for life. He won the court case, believe it or not. He won the court case and he became a slave. Do we have it? He became a slave, the first one. I tell you this story to show you that it's a human problem. It doesn't matter. It's not a white condition or a black condition. It's a human condition. Man will enslave any man when he can. This is a warning sign. It has happened throughout history. It's one of the layers of cake. Back in a minute. Real solutions, we know, don't usually come from the government. Where do they come from? Why is it difficult for Americans to get their heads around where the real solutions come from? People! And it usually starts in church. In the 1800s, reform started in the churches. Remember, I told you this. Reform starts with this guy. Not a good guy entirely. And then it just takes off. Well, people knew that they couldn't continue to enslave other human beings and be right with God. Now, some people would put their head in the sand just like today. Some people, you're like, what? How are you doing this? Even before independence, Quakers and many other religious groups had argued that slavery was incompatible with the teachings of Christ. Our founders did the same thing. But it goes into the 1800s. The 1800s. 1835, the Ohio Anti-Slavery Society in Zanesville holds its first meeting. Now, these are religious whites who are vehemently opposed to slavery. And by the 1840s, Ohio abolitionists like Levi Coffin helped thousands of slaves escape to freedom on what you now know as the Ohio Underground Railroad. Harriet Tubman. Remember that one? You know Harriet Tubman, you read about her, but do you know everything else around it? She's a devout Christian. She's one of the best-known conductors of the Underground Railroad. This woman is a hero, miraculous. She not only escaped, she went back in and escorted 300 slaves to freedom. If I'm not mistaken, I hate to speak out of, I think she went back for her husband, and her husband was with another woman, and she's like, you're staying there, and she moved on. She was born into slavery in Maryland. She married a free slave, escaped to the north, risked everything, returned back to the south to save her family members. Then there's Harriet Beecher Stowe. Not only wrote about the experiences like Uncle Tom's Cabin and Trails of Slaves, but she and her husband, Calvin Stowe, a professor of biblical literature, sheltered slaves in their own home. Now, many people have probably already put this part together, but Ohio was not predominantly black. In fact, it was quite the opposite. So wait a minute. So now white people aren't all bad. It was the religious white people that woke up the nation of the rest of the white people as saying, what are you doing? It was the realization that this was wrong and that the two parties, weren't doing anything about it. They weren't going to stop this. The government wouldn't stop it because of commerce. And science was backing them up. So somebody suggested a new movement. A new party, a third party, if you will, destroyed the Whigs. It was called the Republican Party. The Republican Party doesn't mean then what it means now. The name was chosen because it alluded to equality, reminded people of Thomas Jefferson and his Democratic Republican Party, small government. In 1860, the first Republican is elected, Abraham Lincoln. Firmly established the new party as a major political party in the United States. Because the other two weren't doing anything, another one came in and said, get out of our way, we'll do it. A party that was very much libertarian at the time. The party and president that brought the abolition of slavery. Now you'd think that you might hear that from time to time in the political discourse, but you don't. The secular humanists, the Democrats who believed in social justice, no, they took the nation by the hand, all the while fighting rich, white, Republican racists tooth and nail, and they don't talk about that. Led the nation down a path to Emancipation Proclamation. No, none of that could be further from the truth. It's this guy. And it's a group of religious people that finally say, you know what? Nobody's going to do anything, so we will. Final thoughts next. Tonight, we're trying to show you just some of the layers of this cake. Oh, the cake boss. I love you. I watch your show all the time. Some of the layers of this cake that make up our history. If you can squeeze in, you see that it's not what you might expect. Our civil rights history. It's not just one layer. You've got to know the things that led to the horrible disaster that was slavery, and then the things that happened that eventually culminated in the civil rights movement. But we're not done yet. We're never done on this. I believe you have to look at what these institutions are saying and doing to get an indication of where we're going, where we're headed. because this is a common theme that has happened since the beginning of time. Commerce, religion, government, and science. If you look at them, you'll see patterns throughout history. And the patterns that need to be avoided involve collusion. It is the only way to prevent the evil that comes from a combination of these. You got to look when they start to collude. This program is not intended to be the end-all and be-all. We don't have enough time to go through every single layer of 400 years. What we're trying to do is show you the history that you aren't taught, to hopefully inspire you to go out and search more information. One of the mantras of this show, or at least of me, is question with boldness. Question everything. Listen, if you're going to college right now, don't you listen to those professors. Don't you just take it from them. You question them. You read everything they tell you not to read. You read everything they tell you to read, and then you read everything that they tell you not to read. You find out why they don't like it. Challenge them. Find out on your own what's true. A special thanks to all the former internees of World War II who shared their incredible stories with us. May they remind us of what can never, ever happen again in this country, and how fragile civil rights can be if we're not alert and we don't stand to protect them. From New York, good night, America.